Yo, what is going on, everyone? My name is Nick, or the Notorious Fantasy, and in today's video, we're going to be going in depth into my top 5 bounce-back players for the 2023 fantasy football season. All 5 of these players, I believe, are going to have much better seasons in 2023 compared to last year in 2022. But before we could get into things, I would like to ask that if you guys are new to the channel and you do end up enjoying today's video, that you please make sure to hit that subscribe button down below. And while you're down there, whether you are new to the channel or not, please make sure that you do leave a like on today's video. It would help me out a ton. If you want to follow me on Twitter, please do so at NotoriousFantasy. So without further ado, let's get into my 2023 top 5 bounce back players. We begin at number 1 with a bit of a layup here, and that is Jonathan Taylor, running back of the Indianapolis Colts, current underdog ADP running back number 2 at pick 11.2. Now, despite the fact that Jonathan Taylor bent everyone who drafted him number 1 overall over a table last season, it seems like the consensus is that, hey, we're gonna push that to the side, right? We know he shit the bed last year, but this year he's going to bounce back because everyone has to believe that. Otherwise, he wouldn't be coming off the board as the RB number 2 on Underdog Fantasy. Last year, again, despite that super high draft capital, RB number 1, the hot 2021 season, everyone banging the drum, me included, for Jonathan Taylor. He was bad. Running back 34.5 PPR, running back 18.5 PPR points per game. Playing in 11 games, he had 192 carries, 17.5 per game, 24th at running back, 861 rushing yards, 78.3 per game, 22nd, 40 targets, 3.6 per game, 27th, 28 receptions, 2.5 per game, 30th, 143 receiving yards, 13 per game, 47th, and 4 total touchdowns, 41st at running back. Now, the Indianapolis Colts as a whole were an unmitigated disaster, a dumpster fire last season. It wasn't just Jonathan Taylor had a bad year and we're kind of scoffing it, brushing it off the shoulder. It was just the Colts were awful. They went ahead and used their strategy yet again of bringing in an old veteran quarterback who was walking the earth with the fucking dinosaurs back in the day. They used Phillip Rivers, then they went to Carson Wentz, and then they went to Matt Ryan, and Matt Ryan looked like a shell of himself. He was atrocious. He was so bad that they brought back in Sam Ehlinger, then went back to Matt Ryan. They fired Frank Reich. They bring in their former Hall of Fame center to be the head coach of the team. Everything went wrong in Indianapolis, and Jonathan Taylor didn't even stay healthy, and the offensive line wasn't as great as we thought it would be, right? Every single possible thing that could have went wrong for the Colts went completely wrong. Jonathan Taylor had 4.2 true yards per carry last year, 30th at running back, though he was dominant for his team, 24.8% dominator rating, which is a running back's percentage of total team yards and team touchdowns generated on offense, 13th at running back. So again, Jonathan Taylor wasn't the best last season. He wasn't terrible. While he shit the bed for fantasy purposes, his play wasn't that bad. Like, if you watch the tape, it wasn't that gross. But obviously not what you wanted. Why do you want to buy back in on him would be the question that some people might have, right? They might say, hey, Jonathan Taylor screwed me last year. Why should I draft him in 2023? Pretty simple for me. They're going to bring in a new quarterback in the NFL draft. They now have a coach that isn't a dumbass. Jonathan Taylor is really good. It's really not that difficult to see a humongous bounce back. Like, you shouldn't be shocked at all if he's the RB number 1 in 2023 if he finishes that way. So I'm pretty comfortable with Jonathan Taylor. I'll push to the side a down year for Jonathan Taylor. If he's bad again, maybe he's just not that good of a running back, but that's just not how I think of things. I do think he is one of the better running backs in the NFL. At number 2, we move to Calvin Ridley, wide receiver of the Jacksonville Jaguars. Current ADP wide receiver 19 on Underdog Fantasy at pick 36.8. Now, his last season technically was 2021, but he only played in 5 games in 2021. So we're going to take a step back even further towards 2020 for a closer representation of what he could do in a full season. In 15 games in 2020 with the Atlanta Falcons, he had 143 targets, 9.5 per game, number 7 at wide receiver, 90 receptions, 6 per game, number 11, 1,374 receiving yards, 91.6 per game, 4th, and 9 total touchdowns, 9th at wide receiver. And Calvin Ridley was also uber efficient. 2.48 yards per route run, 7th at wide receiver. 0.51 fantasy points per route run, 9th at wide receiver. 1.9 target separation, 21st at wide receiver. And 9 drops, 6.3% rate, third at wide receiver, which isn't the best, dropping the ball a decent amount, but it is what it is. Figured I'd bring it back because it was a stat that was very notable to me, but because, whenever you see drops, people start to shit themselves, but I'm not too worried about that. So I like Calvin Ridley a lot. I think he is going to bounce back, but I wanted to talk about him with the devil and the angel argument, which is the devil, the negative, the angel, the positive. So the positives are that Calvin Ridley is really fucking good. I know people have short-term memory in fantasy football. They just remember what happened last year. If you remember in the past, we were really talking up Calvin Ridley. I loved Calvin Ridley. A lot of fantasy analysts were gawking this guy, right? Getting down on their knees, giving the guy the gawk 9,000. Everyone loved Calvin Ridley, and rightfully so. The guy is uber talented coming out of college. He looked amazing in the NFL. He's looked amazing. Now, he's been off for some time, right? He bet on himself, metaphorically and literally, because he fucking bet on the Falcons when he wasn't playing, and then he served a year suspension in the NFL, and then in 2021, he was dealing with some outside stuff. If you read, he posted something on Twitter about what was going on with him, and if you want to read that, go right ahead. I'm not trying to fucking do the too long didn't read of what he wrote, but he was dealing with some stuff. Sucks, obviously, but again, people have this short-term memory with the NFL. We haven't seen him in a while. He didn't look the best in 2021, so the guy fucking sucks in some people's mind. And the positive argument for him is, again, that he is really good. He's really efficient, and he's on a team that's offense looks really good, and Trevor Lawrence really took a humongous leap up with Doug Peterson in 2022. The negative, the devil on the shoulder, metaphorically, would be that Calvin Ridley hasn't played in about a season and a half. Calvin Ridley now joins an offense with Christian Kirk, with Zay Jones, with Evan Ingram. That's a team with legitimate weapons around him, right? It's not like Calvin Ridley in Atlanta where they had the fucking fossil of Julio Jones there, right? It's not that. That's not what's happening. He's in a loaded offense. So again, I think Calvin Ridley's going to bounce back. I don't think there's going to be any rust. I think he's going to come out and put the NFL on notice. Have a great year, and it wouldn't shock me 1 ounce if he was a top 12 wide receiver in fantasy football. But I want to make it known, while I'm confident of the bounce back, I don't love him at wide receiver 19. I don't, because I think this offense is loaded to the gills with talent, and I'm not sure Calvin Ridley is the clear dog, the clear alpha in this offense. Next up, we move to number 3, Deshaun Watson, quarterback of the Cleveland Browns, ADP quarterback number 9, pick 79.2, quarterback 36 in 2022. He only played in 6 games, so that should be expected. Quarterback 25 in points per game. When he did play, though, it looked bad. It looked really bad. Deshaun Watson looked like the guy hadn't fucking picked up a football in a decade, right? The guy was downright garbage. Terrible. And it started to look a little bit better towards the end of the season, but it still wasn't at all what I expected him to look like. I expected him to look much better. 6 games played, like I said, 170 passing attempts, 28.3 per game, 37th, 1,102 passing yards, 183.7 per game, 38th, 7 passing touchdowns at a 4.1% rate. Passing touchdown rate is important, and I will give you a quick kind of overview of my thought process on passing touchdown rate. If you are around the 5% number, it is very likely that you are going to, that's pretty normal, right? The 5% passing touchdown rate is very normal. So if Deshaun Watson, say, had a 4.9% passing touchdown rate, I would say for someone as good as Deshaun Watson, that's pretty normal. Could in 2023, if he had a 4.9% number, could he go to 5.5? Sure. But I wouldn't expect him to drop a bunch, right? He could obviously go crazy and do 7%. If someone throws 7% passing touchdown rate, that means more than likely there's going to be a drop-off. So 4.1% on a bad season for Watson tells me it's going to go up in 2023. He threw 5 interceptions. Pretty shit for 6 games, right? That's almost an interception every game. Something, though, I think people forget about with Deshaun Watson. 36 carries. 19th at quarterback, 175 rushing yards. 16th at quarterback, 29.2 rushing yards per game, 11th, and 1 rushing touchdown, 20th. Now, Deshaun Watson isn't Lamar Jackson. He's not Kyler Murray. He's not Jalen Hurts. He's not the prototypical rushing quarterback, but he's also not some fucking statue that just stands there in the pocket. He has some rushing upside. Now, I talk about efficiency stats with all these players. Deshaun Watson didn't play enough games to qualify for most efficiency stats, and I'm going to be honest, if he qualified, the efficiency stats wouldn't look good at all, because again, the guy sucked ass last season. It was really bad. He was playing a little stiff. It was bad. He did not look good at all. Based upon what I've seen out of Deshaun Watson in his career in Houston, if he comes out in 2023 and plays as bad as he did last year, that contract that Cleveland gave him, where they backed up the Brinks truck, they gave him all that guaranteed money, they're going to look like fucking idiots. Buffoons. But Cleveland has Amari Cooper. They brought in Elijah Moore. They have Donovan Peoples-Jones. They have David Njoku. They have Nick Chubb, right? They have a great offense. They have a good offensive line as well. So my best bet is that Deshaun Watson is going to bounce back. I think it doesn't feel the best to select him. I know it doesn't. When you're at quarterback 9, you're looking at Watson, you're looking at some other quarterbacks, you might not feel like I need to run to the draft board if you're in real life and slap the Deshaun Watson sticker on the screen, right? You might not feel like that. You might not feel in love with Deshaun Watson, and I get that. Last year showed bad. It was awful. But based upon his past, on the field, not off the field, he was a great player. So Deshaun Watson, I could see him very easily bouncing back, especially with how good of an offense the Cleveland Browns should have. Their weapons, like I said, I named them all off, really good. And again, Deshaun Watson's rushing upside, a little sneaky, but pretty solid as well for fantasy football. Before we move into players 4 and 5, this video is brought to you by Underdog Fantasy. If you click on the link in the video description, you will get a $100 first match deposit bonus on the website. Underdog Fantasy is a best ball website. This is where I pull all of the average draft positions for in these videos. I play on there all the time. Right now, they're running the big board draft, but Superflex. So Superflex is where you can play quarterback as one of your flexes. Pretty fun. I love doing drafts on there. And best ball, the reason why I like it so much is because you're not stuck with it all season, right? You don't have to sit there every single day editing your lineup. You don't have to sit there doing waivers. You just draft the 20 players on your team, and then the computer on Underdog automatically puts the highest scores into your lineup, and then you might come back at the end of the season and win a boatload of money. So if you want to check it out, I've done videos on the channel already on it. So if you don't want to put your money in before you watch it, or before you see how it works, just go ahead and check out one of the videos, mock draft videos. They're all on there. So make sure you guys check that out. Again, link in the video description down below. You also don't have to deposit $100. It's just a 100% deposit bonus up to $100. So if you deposit $50, they give you an additional $50 using my link if you're a first-time depositor. So back on into things. At number 4, we have Cam Akers, running back of the LA Rams. ADP running back 26 off the board at pick 82.2. Now, Cam Akers was another guy that people touted pretty decently last year. I was not super high on the Cam Akers train, and he played really bad, right? To start off the year, people cut him. And then towards the end of the season, it wasn't really a roller coaster ride because it was just down, 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 and magically it went up right at the end. Whoosh. Could he keep up that momentum? I think so. Running back 33.5 PPR last year, running back 36.5 PPR points per game, tied with A.J. Dillon, Brian Robinson, and CEH. He played in 15 games last year, but only started 9 games. He requested a trade by the trade deadline, and they didn't trade him. 188 carries, 12.5 per game, 26th. 786 rushing yards, 52.4 per game, 29th. 18 targets, 61st. 13 receptions, 64th. 117 receiving yards, 55th. And 7 total touchdowns, 19th. He was actually the 15th most dominant running back according to the Dominator rating on Player Profiler, 23.4% Dominator rating. So again, not the best season out of Cam Akers. If you had him, you probably were pissed at the beginning of the season. You may have even cut him, and then you saw him ascend towards the end of the season. The season for the LA Rams, pretty similar to the Colts, except for the Rams had way higher expectations. Matthew Stafford gets hurt. Cooper Kupp gets hurt. Allen Robinson sucks ass. They bring in Baker. They have all these quarterbacks starting. It's bad. It looks real bad in LA. And Cam Akers somehow rises at the end of the season. Again, I'm not someone who loves Cam Akers' talent. Like, I'm not saying Cam Akers is the second coming of fucking LaDainian Tomlinson or something, right? I don't think he's one of the best running backs to ever grace the NFL. I don't even think he's one of the best running backs in the NFL. But I think given the situation in LA gets better, Stafford stays healthy, the offensive line plays a little bit better, then sure, Cam Akers could easily be a top 16-ish running back that has some spike games. He's pretty clearly the RB1 on the team. So at running back 26 at that price, based upon what we saw towards the end of the last season, I'm kind of prone to believe he's going to bounce back. Final player to discuss here at number 5, Brandin Cooks, wide receiver of the Dallas Cowboys. ADP wide receiver 43 at pick 86.4. Wide receiver 49 in half PPR in 2022. Wide receiver 41 in half PPR points per game. This was a big down season for Brandin Cooks. 93 targets, 7.2 per game, 39th. 57 receptions, 4.4 per game, 44th, 699 receiving yards only, 53.8 per game, 44th, and 3 total touchdowns, 50th. Some efficiency stats, 8th in contested catch rate with 60%, 13th in target separation versus man with 2.1, and 27th in route win rate with 43.8. Prior to 2022, he had 6 1,000-yard seasons out of 8 seasons. So 6 of 8 with over 1,000 yards. Doesn't play great last year. The Texans are awful. Then he gets traded to the Dallas Cowboys with Dak Prescott. Now, I know I like to make fun of Dak. People love to make fun of Dak. But ultimately, Dak is miles better than Davis Money Mills or Jeff Driscoll, whoever the fuck they also were starting last year. So, was it Jeff Driscoll? I don't even remember, right? The Houston Texans sucked last year. They're out of your mind, right? They were out of sight, out of mind. They were awful. But Brandin Cooks is great. He's great. He's put up numbers on like half of the NFL teams. He gets passed around like a blunt at a party. All right, Brandin Cooks, while he's used by a bunch of different teams, he's still good. Dak is good. This Dallas offense should be good. While in the postseason, they'll probably collapse. Brandin Cooks is looking good for a big bounce back spot in 2023 with an actual quarterback on a real team that isn't awful like the Texans. And he doesn't even have to move that far, I would assume. I'm not sure the exact geography of Houston to Dallas, but it can't be that far. So shout out to my guy, Brandin Cooks. I love Brandin Cooks going into last season. I know he wasn't the best, but I really think he's good enough to bounce back and surpass 1,000 yards. I know CeeDee Lamb is still there. Obviously, he's the clear wide receiver 2 on the team. Michael Gallup's there too, but they get rid of Dalton Schultz. Brandin Cooks, the number 2 guy, could be in for a really solid season. Again, wide receiver 43. I think he's going to finish way higher than that. So thank you guys all so much for watching. If you did end up enjoying, make sure you hit that subscribe button down below, as well as hitting that like button down below. It would help me out a ton. I love you guys all so much. Hope you have a great guys' day. And as always, good boy.